First of all, welcome to our first field trip. What we wanted to talk about here was not just what Microsoft is doing as far as products go, but also as far as their strategy goes and why they're doing it. And one of the things that is critical here to understand is what's happening to the marketplace. And this is, I just saw this, I was at a conference down in Miami last week, and this was really telling. This is a slide of how much time people are spending per day on digital media over the years. And as you can see, the yellows are basically connected devices, okay? Which can be pretty much anything that people are using to connect that are not traditional PCs or phones or the like. The blue, and that hasn't changed much, 0.2 to 0.4 from 2008 to 2015. Then we've got the desktop laptops, what we traditionally, especially what Microsoft traditionally considered their bread and butter. Again, 2.2 to 2.4. The amount of time that the average person spends online with desktops and laptops hasn't changed. Now you take a look at the mobile devices. The mobile devices, 0.3, 0.3, 0.4, 0.8 to 2.8. We're now at the point when we talk about growth, and this is all USA stuff, but when we talk about growth in terms of where people, whether they be doing business or they're doing pleasure, personal stuff, the growth is absolutely on the mobile market. Microsoft has not been blind to this. Okay. Microsoft has been blind to this, but they're getting better. And we'll talk about how they're getting better as we go through. But this is one of the most critical slides when you're trying to figure out what companies are doing. This speaks volumes. Now, for those of you who are in corporate IT, this speaks volumes about your employees. Because either they're doing this or they want to do this, as far as accessing data and information. And remember, especially when we talk about security, we've been doing PC, desktop, and laptop security for a lot longer than 2008. We haven't been doing it on mobile devices. And as you take a look, and this is my theory, if you take a look at 2011 is really, it doubled 50%. That's about the same time where people started buying stuff on mobile devices. That's really where the money started changing hands. And really when the services started becoming. So the reason that people are spending an inordinately higher amount of time on their mobile devices is also the reasons why we have to be more secure and more concerned about the usage of these devices. And the industry really hasn't kept up. We really haven't. Best example I give people is always my flashlight application. You know, I got an Android phone, I want to be able to see in the dark, I'm going to download an application that's a flashlight, because that's what I want my $500 device to do. So I take a look at the flashlight application, it's been downloaded over 2 million times. And the first thing, and it's over 100,000 likes of 4 stars or greater. So people love it, people trust it, people like it, people use it. And the first thing it asks when you try to install it is, the application will need access to your network, to your credentials, to your contact list, to all your devices, all of your files, all of that. It's a flashlight application, and yet it's asking for this. Now, so is it malware? Could be. We have no way of knowing if it isn't. But more importantly, you have millions of people who are installing it anyway, and you have hundreds of thousands of people who are saying it's fantastic anyway. So that's what we're dealing with here. Similar. This is worldwide. If you take a look at the shipments of the devices, desktop portable PCs, not only flat, they're going down. Smartphone tablet shipments, going up significantly. So when we talk about Microsoft, when you talk about Google, when you talk about Apple, when you talk about anybody, and when you talk about organizations who are using these devices and sharing information, you have to keep these numbers in your head, because that's what's happening out there. Now this one's even worldwide. So here's the challenge. And this is kind of a side note, but I wanted to bring this up so you're aware. So we have people who are using the laptop, the regular desktop, the tablets, and their mobile devices, but they all want to use all of these tools. They want to use your traditional, solid applications like SAS, SAP, all of these kind of things that we traditionally were saying were terminals or were actual desktop apps. No, not anymore. We want to be able to get to that information from anywhere, anyone, anyhow. Same thing for web-based or cloud-based services, 365, Salesforce, Dropbox, any of these sort of things. And then also, finally, the actual applications along those lines. The bottom line is that people want to get to their data anywhere, anyhow, anytime, from anything. As you can see, this is a fancy PowerPoint graph, which means I didn't do it. But if you look at these numbers, the devices, mobile workforce, is technology aligning with business strategy? All of these are becoming more and more critical. And this is something that Microsoft has been actually doing more than they're given credit for, but a lot of it was in the works. And that's what's changing here. So Windows 10 is now, it's the same operating system. It's the same software, whether you're running it on a desktop, a server, a tablet, a phone, or even a production device. It's the same software code. And there are many versions of Windows 10. And I'm not going to go too deep into this. If you've seen our Windows 10 presentation, the first of which we did back in October last year, this is familiar to you. But here's one of the key things. If you take a look over the past 6 to 12 months, and actually you can even look forward, these are technologies that have been either newly introduced or significantly updated by Microsoft, okay? That have some level of cooperation, collaboration, either between devices, between users, between organizations, or between themselves. This is not just stuff that Microsoft has updated. I don't have Exchange 2016 here. I don't have Project Server 2016. I don't have Project 2016. I'm strictly talking about that whole concept of collaboration, and collaboration on a large scale. And if you think about it from Microsoft's standpoint, look at Office 2016. Think about it from 2 years ago, even last year, but even 2 years ago. You basically had two flavors of Office. You had Office for your PC, and yeah, we got Office for your Mac. And that was it. Why? Because Microsoft sold Office to drive PC sales, and PC sales drove Office sales. That was how they made their money. And Ballmer, former CEO, kind of realized that that wasn't going to work anymore. But the new CEO, whose name I never can remember, was that Nadella? Brilliant guy. And he hit on immediately. He said, no, it can't be that way anymore. So this year alone, you've had Office, not Office knockoffs, not Office lookalikes. Office has been released not only for the Mac and for Windows, but the iPhone, the iPad, the Android phone, tablet, and Windows Phone, because those 4 people using Windows Phone really need it. I'm one, Kevin's another, and we really got to reach out to those other 2 guys and just see how they're doing. Okay, we're not kicked out yet.
But I can't, they said my phone doesn't project my Windows Phone.
With that phone? Yeah, and it's one of those, we'll talk about Windows Phone as far as some of the issues facing that. But the key thing is now, when we're talking about an end user wanting to access their information, we've removed what device they're using. Now, to be sure, the functionality of an iPhone, of Office on an iPhone, is different from the functionality on a Windows desktop, because it's got more horsepower and it's got more real estate, screen size, all that kind of fun stuff. But the fact remains is Microsoft has made it an absolute strategic direction to offer the functionality on multiple devices. Why? Because that's the way the market is going. There's no way around it. That was heresy to Microsoft, even 2 or 3 years ago. Okay? You then have the Office web apps. I'm not a huge fan of Office web apps in general. I like the on-prem, the stuff that's loaded on my system, but they're there. 365, Windows 10, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business. The 3 of those devices, or the 3 of those services, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, essentially give you the ability to work on stuff on your system or on the web, and to collaborate and share it with people both within your organization and outside of your organization. And they give your organization the ability to control access to those files, in the case of SharePoint, and not as much on OneDrive. I'll be honest with you, OneDrive, as far as a as a corporate data sharing strategy, it's not quite there yet. Okay, they're improving it, but it's not quite there yet. And then you have Skype for Business, because we can't have too many different things called the same name for Microsoft, because that's what they like to do. So Skype is the phone, okay? Originally was set up as pretty much a personal end user phone system. Now, one of the things that you'll see is Office 365 is now coming out with the E5 plan. The E5 plan is really Microsoft's first direct shot to replace the on-premise phone system and to replace also cloud-based phone services. So you actually can have with the E5 plan that hasn't been fully released, I think December is when it's finally fully available, but that will basically be your phone system, will be Office 365. Now, do not go out and buy it. There are some restrictions there that they're not pushing terribly, but it's definitely the direction that they're going to. Okay? Azure, the whole cloud. What is Azure? Azure is essentially an extension of your infrastructure. Whether it be an extension as services or extension as servers or devices, a lot is there. And it can be used for service level stuff, or it can be used for full-blown servers and the like. We did our introduction to Azure a couple months ago at our luncheon arm. OneNote, how many of you guys are OneNote users? Okay, I'm not, because I'm older. But one of the things, and especially OneNote 2016, take a look at it, especially on Windows 10. Take a look at OneNote 2016 on Windows 10, especially on a Surface Pro, one of the newer devices. The integration, the ability for you to actually edit your OneNote drive. So what you can do is, using the Microsoft Edge, which is the new browser, you can actually annotate the web page you're looking at and immediately push that image over to Edge. And you can do it, you can actually double click the pen and it'll automatically open OneNote and do there's some really cool integration things. These guys should be able to help you. I've seen it, I haven't actually worked with it yet. So, the Xbox One, the integration there. Cortana, how many of you guys have played with Cortana at all? Okay, take a look at it. Now here's the thing about Cortana, and this is why I'm excited about Cortana. First of all, a girl who talked to me. But the second thing that's most interesting, it's a front end. The whole Cortana interface can be used in a development environment. It's not quite there yet. So what's going to be able to happen is, and think of it from a BI standpoint, you're basically going to be able to have developers creating applications whereby data queries, because it's built to do this. This was the design from the beginning with Cortana, so that people can actually do verbal queries of data, and the data will then be presented to them. So the whole question of, hey, what was our sales like last year for our customers in Cuyahoga County? Well, normally we have to ask somebody who knows how to translate that to SQL, or who knows how to walk through a wizard. With the Cortana front end, the way it's designed, you'll be able to ask that. Cortana will take that natural English, turn that into the SQL statement, present you with the results. So you're going to be able, the whole concept of data analysis is not going to be based on people knowing how to run through wizards or write queries. They're going to be able to ask questions. And it's built in such a way that it can get smarter based on your experience. Now, a lot of people, when we talk about, Siri, Cortana, Google, what's Google's? Google Now. A lot of people just simply say, hey, if you ask questions, we'll give you something cool. This goes deeper. And this is one of the things Microsoft is really, really horrible explaining why stuff is slower sometimes to come out to market, is because there's method to the madness and there's stuff underlying it. But Cortana is one that I'm really curious to see how Cortana looks in about 5 years. Because I think it is going to, and we may not realize it's Cortana for some of the things that it does, but some of the things that is going to be there is just going to be really cool. And Connect. Microsoft came so close to blowing it completely with Connect. Everybody familiar with Connect? Able to make the gestures and all that. When Microsoft had the Connect device, which allows you to make gestures, which your game console interprets that so that you can play the games, Microsoft closed the development interface. They made it so developers couldn't use that, couldn't interface with the Connect because it was theirs. And then somebody hacked it. And I think the first thing they ended up doing was they programmed their vacuum cleaner, I think was what, so that there was a YouTube video of a guy controlling his vacuum cleaner by gesturing. And Microsoft, and the guy, he committed a crime because he hacked into the interface. He was able to use it and develop it. And Microsoft suddenly said, oh yeah, that could work well for us. So they opened it up now. So now what's happening again, it's a front end, developers can use that technology to build new interfaces. And then you take a look at what Microsoft's doing with the HoloLens. So think about this in terms of 3 areas of development. First of all, they're developing a front end so that developers can create by taking verbal input and turning that into data requests and all of that kind of fun stuff. Cool. So we're now working with the voice to work and play with applications in ways we haven't done before. Then let's take the Connect so I can actually make gestures and the system will recognize and interpret the gestures and turn them into commands. And now with the HoloLens, with it projecting data in front of us, now we're basically able to point to things, project the data on screen, take the data, move it around. 3 years ago, keyboard and mouse, screen. That was it. That was how we interacted. That's how we related. And so when we looked at our phones, our mobile devices, we were like, well, I can only do so much. So just with those 3 product lines and the development that Microsoft's going into play, it's rewriting the book, okay? When you look at that, and you look at what Microsoft's doing with their cloud services and with their on-prem local, nobody's doing this. Nobody else is close to have the resources and the flexibility and the adaptability to look at these new ways of doing things. Now that's not to say that they're going to conquer the world again or anything along those lines, but don't count them out and recognize that what they're doing, there's method to the madness and all that good fun stuff. Now, frighteningly, I've been saying this for about 3 years now. I've been talking about how they've got method, how they're integrating and all of that kind of stuff. So either one of 2 things is happening. I'll leave it up to you. Number one, I am incredibly brilliant. And 3 years ago, I recognized what was happening and I knew. Or if I keep saying the same thing over and over again, sooner or later it's bound to happen. Which is pretty much what's going on. Which is why I'm announcing the Microsoft Jetpack. So when we talk about access of information. A lot of times you can actually put geological digs on these. So about 3 years ago, we started talking, it was on-premise. Everything was on-premise. On-premise was it. The data was here. We may connect to it remotely through VPN, but that was the exception more than the rule. Then we added cloud. Okay, and 2 years ago, it was kind of like you had the new thinkers who were saying it's cloud, it's cloud, it's cloud, it's cloud, and you had the old thinkers, no way, no way, no way, no way. It's on-premise, 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 on-premise. Well, for about the past 2 years, we've been going on actually it's both. In some cases, the resources are appropriate to have in the cloud, and in some cases, they're appropriate to have on-premise, and in some cases, they should be synchronized between the two so they're available either way, because there's benefits and economies there for both. And so on-premise is now the one du jour. The one I would add to this, though, is the local. And that's data when I'm not online. So if I've got my tablet, I've got my laptop, I've got my device, and I'm not connected to anything, I'm out in Amish land, can I still get access to my data? And that's one of the things that a lot of the technology vendors, including Microsoft, forget to bring up. Because if you're going on to client sites and they're potential clients, you don't want to say, hey, can I log on to your wireless network now because I want to download a bunch of data and I want to go look at things. You don't want that barrier or that request for a favor to get in the way. Or you're on a plane and you're not, you want to work, but the data's up in the cloud or it's on premise. So the local has kind of gotten the short staff here as far as the need and all that kind of. I just bring that up because I don't know. That's my way. The other thing I want to talk about real briefly is just the flavors of the cloud, and this really doesn't have a lot to do with this topic in particular. I just want to point it out that, so the flavors of the cloud, free service commodity, that would be your Dropbox, your just stuff that you're related to and purchasing for the individual. The issue on that is if it's free, it's a commodity. How much is that vendor paying? How is that vendor making money? Are they making money by gathering metrics and data about you? Are they using it to just market to their full product? The bottom line, though, is they're not going to protect it. They're not going to spend a lot of resource protecting the stuff. Service commodity, that's where you're going to pay for it. But one of the things, and especially for you guys in the corporate IT, that you have to keep in mind is how much centralized control do you want over this stuff? If you basically have a bunch of salespeople who are out and running about and doing whatever, and they all have their own Dropbox accounts, and you're concerned about if a salesperson leaves or is let go, they still have all that information, they still have that access to that data. If you're using some of these services, somebody may be paying for it, but they've got the access, they've got the keys to their kingdom. And that's not always a good thing. Plus, you don't know do you know who they're sharing the data with, under what circumstances they're sharing it, all that kind of fun stuff. Then you've got the service commodity corporate level. I would put Office 365, I put Google Docs in there as well. That's where companies are making significant infrastructure investments, security is taken seriously, all of that kind of fun stuff. Vertical applications, those are cloud services where a company is Salesforce, salesforce.com, where they've got this application, they're doing this way. And then corporate infrastructure, that would be your Amazon Web Services, Azure, the like, where you're actually able to extend your corporate infrastructure, or in some cases, just have your corporate infrastructure up there in the cloud. If anybody using Azure right now for your organization, you will be. Or using the Amazon services, or IBM's. IBM has good services as well. One thing I also want to talk about real quick here is plumbing. A lot of times when we talk about data and we talk about information, we forget the fact that it's being sent from point A to point B. And what I mean by that is that when we're in a local office, and that local office has wiring and we're connected to that network, by and large, the data that's transmitting across those wires are usually at 1,000 megabits per second. So 1,000 million bits of information per second, or 1 gigabit. Okay, very, very fast. So we're transmitting data back and forth. I'm not going to get into all the switches and all that kind of fun stuff. But the bottom line, that's the speed. So you can use that metric. So when I'm at working from home, I've got whatever I got with Time Warner, whoever my provider is, which is usually not 1,000 megabits per second. It's getting better, but if I've got cable or the like, I may be getting 5 or 10 if I'm paying a good premium for it. Could be getting significantly less. If I've got DSL, I'm getting less than 1. So all of a sudden, the data that I'm accessing from the local office that I was getting at 1,000 megabits per second, I'm now connecting from home or from a remote site at 1/1000th of the speed, or 5/1000ths of the speed, or 10/1000ths of the speed, but a lot slower, plus not secured. So we've got that issue as well. So when we talk about, and then we've got our customers. So I've got data that's contained perhaps over here that is being accessed by my customers or my vendors, and I'm basically, whatever they've got connected, whichever one's fast or whichever one's slowest, that's the speed I'm getting the data. And remember, everybody at this company is using this pipe. Everybody at this company is using this pipe. So from a plumbing standpoint, it's not a given that people who are used to using data that's located here, getting 1,000 megabits, that they're going to have the same experience when they're from home or at some other company. So when we talk about this online, on-premise, local, cloud, we have to keep this stuff in mind. Now, at a cloud service provider like Azure, 365, Google, Amazon, any of those, they spend a lot of money. So they have a ton of speed here, which is great, but you are still limited to whatever the slowest is. So when companies look at, in terms of how to do their data, the cloud would essentially, if they do a cloud strategy, that would essentially be everybody here going through this pipe to get the data here. A hybrid strategy has everybody here going after the data here, but at the same time, this data is then synchronized up to here where everybody else can get to it. So this is no longer anywhere near the bottleneck. Now, if this sounds confusing, well, it kind of is, because there's a lot of moving parts here. But the thing is having conversations with somebody who's familiar with plumbing, which as long as it doesn't actually really involve plumbing includes us, to talk about what your needs are. And this is especially true when companies talk about, I want to move to the cloud. We don't know what that means. We need to talk about it in terms of these things. Blah, blah, blah. So that was that presentation. Now I want to do something a little bit different. Not really going to get a good, we basically have an adapter going to an adapter through an adapter, and it basically says that the only resolution we can get is equivalent to what we had back in 8-bit days. So, I mean, no, actually what's happening is we're showing a new form of screen encryption. Yes, that's exactly what's happening. So I apologize for this, but one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit as far as some of the collaboration, as far as devices goes, is, and this is going to be hard to show, but one of the things that you do, and strictly going to talk about OneDrive for Business along with SharePoint and just OneDrive. So what happens is that you as the user can choose to synchronize any of those folders with your system, which now gives you both online as well as localized copies of the data. And the nice thing there, okay, food's here. And the nice thing about that is that gives you both the online cloud-based as well as the localized version, and you can share it with other people, with other individuals. But then what also happens is that the synchronization happens between the devices. So if, for example, I go into, and we'll just use Word as, hopefully this comes out as a little bit. So what happens up here, as you can see, is we actually see the documents that were worked on most recently. And those do not mean that I worked on those documents on this device. I could have just as easily worked on the documents on my laptop, on a desktop, on my phone, and it now holds that information there. So it's basically synchronizing, so it remembers which device I was last on and what I last did on the other devices. So I now have synchronization, because remember what I was talking about. I want to be able to access my data in any way from any device, any document, and not only can I do that in this instance, but it remembers what I did regardless of the device I used. Okay? Now, one of the things that's also nice is when you open a device, it'll actually say, which page do you want to go to? Do you want to go back to the page you were last on? And that works well as far as the synchronization goes. So you can work on a device. If you're doing a presentation, you can do the presentation on a laptop or a desktop, and then when it comes time, as long as you have an adapter that has the right resolution, you can then just go right to it. That was the last document that I worked on. Okay? In addition, if you take a look at Office 2016, and we just did our first webinar in 2016 a couple weeks ago, we'll be doing our next one in a couple of weeks. We talked about the collaboration enhancements are significant, and I'm not even going to try to show that here in this instance, but that's coming up in some of our next things. So what I wanted to show was really the bottom line here is that Microsoft has done a pretty lousy job of describing this whole concept, this whole issue of how you actually have a strategy. You have a strategy available that allows your people to have access to their data from anywhere, as long as there's a signal there. Yes, it's back. From anywhere, to anywhere, with any device, with the security that the devices bring and all of that kind of fun stuff. And when you're taking a look, especially if you're looking like at Office 365 or you're looking at Azure, there's a lot of things that you can take into account that weren't there before, as far as options and the like. So if you want, we can actually do some demos here. We can talk about it. I apologize, can't really show the stuff terribly well here, or it looks like gibberish. Yes, sir?
Bob, would you mind sharing your opinion with people? Now, you and Kevin both use the Surface Pro 2.
Right, I use the 2, are you on the 2? Yeah.
Okay, and that cost a couple dollars, right? Even back then?
It was about a grand, I think, when all's said and done.
It was the i5 with 128 gig of hard drive and 4 gig of RAM was $1,000. The new one's the same specs as the same price.
Is it? Okay. Okay. And the level of hardware that you guys have is sufficient for this type of collaboration?
Yes.
Are you guys excited about the new hardware that's out here? Most of the end users that I work with are very excited about it.
The key thing is, and this is a conversation I had with somebody else, is you need to recognize, especially for these tablets, the smaller it is, the more expensive it is for the same power. Okay, so a powerful desktop is going to be cheaper than the same power on a laptop is going to be cheaper than the same power on a tablet. So there's a rule of thumb. So when you're looking at the money that you're distributing, keep in mind that portability has a cost right out of the gate. The second is the functionality. I really like the portability of this guy. This is a small little dinky thing. If I had to work on this 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, I'd kill somebody because of the small screen. It is too small for me to use all the time. So if I'm looking at buying one of these things, some device for me to do my work, now I have to measure the how portable do I want it versus how annoying is it when I'm not looking for portability. Now, in the case of all of these devices, you can add a second monitor, you can add a regular keyboard and mouse, but I still end up with a good size first monitor and then a real small second screen.
Right.
So when you're looking at these devices, and the nice thing is, and this is one of the things about the Microsoft world or the Wintel world, unfortunately you have about 100 choices.
Yes.
And it really, unless you can articulate to somebody, starting with yourself, what your real needs are. And they're simple need questions. What's the portability? How important is the battery life and all that kind of stuff? And a lot of these things, the answer is, well, I really don't care. 6 hours life versus 7 hours life, that's not going to make that much of a difference to me. Whatever, but the weight might. Yes. Do I want integrated BitLocker? So I want encrypt. Do I want two-factor authentication? Do I want fingerprint reader, eyeball scanners, all that kind of fun stuff? Do I want those? You need to have some kind of thought process because unfortunately there's so many options out there. They're not going to make it easier for you.
What I'm seeing here is that this is kind of a pivotal moment because we've watched a lot of people get tablets, get really light laptops, and retire them. Because in the end, people aren't really clear what they're after. But just the file synchronization right there, Bob,
Yep.
is a true value that a lot of people haven't gotten with all the money that's been spent on it.
Yeah.
I mean, an iPad and this and that, the other thing, unless you can integrate it. That way, when you get tired of the small screen, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Toss them aside, you're back in the office.
Or you have two devices. There still needs or justification. But the bottom line is you're not cornered into something. What I want to stress here, these tablets are Windows.
Yeah.
Okay, the RT thing, remember the RT? I talk about how bright I was about how Microsoft has been. You remember how smart I was when I talked about how RT was really cool about 4 years ago? That man was an idiot. And what happened was the cost of systems and hardware that were needed to run full Windows became cheap enough that the RT didn't make sense. So with these devices, you are running Windows. You are running everything Windows. Any application that runs on Windows, as long as it meets the minimum hardware, it'll run on this as well. Now, what you don't have is you don't have the app stores. You don't have whether it be what Apple has developed or what Google has developed. So on one side there's a yin and the yang. There's a take and give it away. Now the nice thing is though, you can have multiple. You can have what you need.
Hey, Bob, I'm sorry, Microsoft is an app store.
Yes, it does, and the 3 apps that are on it are fantastic.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it's all kidding, most kidding aside as far as Microsoft goes. It's a tough road because these You know, you have people who are doing the gaming systems and all of that kind of stuff. App stores doesn't hold any real promise for them. And there's no question that Apple and Android have done a fantastic job encouraging developers. Now, the latest developing environments allows you to easily develop apps for all platforms. Jury's out as far as how well that's really been bought into. So, yeah. So, thank you all. Yay!